I want to give you a little bit of history of where I was when LifePoint rolled out this thought that we were going to really significantly reduce our harms across the company. I remember sitting in a leadership meeting at LifePoint very early. I had been the CNO for maybe a year. We were struggling with harms across the entire company. We had patient falls, we had central line infections, we had catheter-associated infections, pressure sores, all those harms that happen to our patients that we really don't think about them being harms. We just think of them as being part of healthcare in general and taking care of patients. And at that time, it was 2011. I was at my first senior ops meeting, and they introduced to us what was called the HEN at the time, the Hospital Engagement Network. And they told us that LifePoint had been awarded a CMS contract to participate in the HEN, the Hospital Engagement Network. And we really didn't know what that meant at the time. They had all these graphs of harms across the company, and they told us that we were going to achieve at least a 50% reduction in our harms across LifePoint. I, as a new CNO, was thinking, I don't know how they think they're going to achieve this, but okay, whatever. They did it. They did it in several years, rather. And it took a lot of coaching and tactics and things that they rolled out that we thought, I don't know how we're ever going to do this in our organization. There were many times that I thought that. So don't think that when I show you these things, I don't know what's going through your mind, because it went through mine as well. But these fundamental patient safety behaviors is what we're calling them, are the things that helped build the base of our harm reduction. It was what got our employees engaged and speaking the terminology that we wanted them to use. And it wasn't a quick process, so don't think that this is going to work overnight. It took years and years and years to build on. But I do want to show you real quick. This is probably the most visible graph that I could show you from where we were to where we went to as far as harms. So back here, we were almost 11% on our harm rates. That was in 2011. That's when they were first rolling all of this stuff out across LifePoint. 2017, we were down to 2% on our harm rates. We went about 9 years. At the time that I left Pulaski, we'd been 9 years without a central line infection. We had been that long, maybe a little longer, without a catheter-associated UTI. We pretty much wiped out everything except for our two biggest nemesis were falls and hospital-acquired pneumonia. We had a geriatric psych unit, which was really, really hard to keep those patients in the upright position sometimes. And we may have used that more as an excuse than we probably should have at times, but that was a really hard population of patients for us to get our arms around. But we still did it. We saw a significant reduction. We just couldn't seem to wipe them out. Another slide, and I see this right here, I want to show you, this is kind of how they demonstrated our harms across the company. When we started in 2011, this is what they call a green light type model, where red, you're not where they want you to be. Yellow is you're doing okay, but you're still not where you should be. And then green, you have no harms at all. 2011, we had reds in lots and lots of places. 2017, we were almost all green, except for hospital-acquired pneumonia. We went several years and then had an uptick and falls with injury. So you can see, to me, that's a pretty visible thing of how successful we were implementing these tools and how we wrapped our arms around it as an organization. So I just wanted to show you all that because it can be done. So the 5 things that we implemented that had the biggest impact in our organization: briefs, debriefs, huddles, learning boards, and executive patient safety rounds. I will tell you the things that were the easiest for us to roll out that kind of went like wildfire, debriefs and huddles. Those were what people seemed to kind of wrap their brain around really quickly, and we'll go through both of those. The things that were the most challenging for us: briefs and learning boards, using them effectively. Now, when our learning boards first went up, they were using them, but it just wasn't in a way that was helping us with our patient safety move. They were really more of a, we need this, I want this board. But as they matured over time, they really became more focused on patient safety. And then executive patient safety rounds. That was probably the hardest thing for me as a CNO to get my arms around before Jim came. And the reason is because Jim was the 7th CEO that I had in my tenure as CNO. I had been the CNO for about 3 years, and he was the 7th CEO that we had. So I never could get the CEO to buy into those executive patient safety rounds. It would be me and the quality director going out and doing these rounds and trying to make a difference with them. And they embraced us. They did what we asked them to do for the most part, but it made such a huge difference when it was being driven by our CEO. And I think anybody that has gone through this program would tell you that. If you don't have your CEO driving this, you'll only be able to do as much as your CNO and quality director can do. So let's talk about briefs a little bit. It typically happens at the start of a shift or before a meeting or at the beginning of something. It's typically planned. We gave our staff a very scripted brief that we wanted them to do. It was an epic fail, to be honest, because when you are clinical and you're trying to get your day started and they give you a list of things you need to say and do before your shift starts, it just really didn't work. It worked if I was in the unit with them, they were doing it great. But when I was not there, or when our quality director wasn't there watching them, or the manager, then they just went on about their day because, you know, they know what's important, patient care, and we were putting an obstacle in the way of them doing patient care. But really a good brief should sort of set the tone for the day in a clinical unit. And I'm a nurse, so a lot of what I talk about is going to be around nursing. But these things can be applied in any area of the hospital. What I wanted more than anything for my staff to do at the beginning of the day was just say, hey, we've got 18 patients today. We've got 2 that are really high fall risk we need to keep our eyes on. We would pull EVS into that and say, if you're down by room 118, keep an eye on this patient. She keeps trying to get up, and let us know if she's getting up out of bed. We have pulled Susie out from the OB department. Welcome, Susie. This is what we're going to give you to do today. Is everybody okay? Anybody have a bad night? Everybody okay? Are you on your A game? And it just needed to be really short and sweet, and that's kind of what a brief is. It's establishing the team, making sure everybody's on the same page, introducing any new people. And they do recommend doing a 3 escalation deep type conversation, like Patty's our director, she's not here today, but Sherry, the CNO, is in-house if we need anything. Or we've got Stacy doing house supervision today because Patty's out. Just a conversation between your staff about where they go next if something goes wrong. So that's kind of what a brief looks like. Key concepts should occur near the beginning of a shift. You should establish the team for the day, which is what I just talked about. You share key priorities, team members' names, availability, resource concerns, resilience, checking the team. You know, that when you're working as a team, it's really good to know if one of your team members is not 100%. You know, and it could be anything going on in their personal life because we all bring that to work with us. You know, maybe somebody's had a sick child they've been up all night with, or they've got a sick parent that they're dealing with, or it could be a variety of things. But talking to each other about everybody's mental status and how they're doing, what their resilience level is, and then knowing that if someone's not 100%, that we need to have their back for the day. Don't let them flounder. You know, you may have to pick up a little extra for them. The 3 deep escalation plan, and it really should last no more than 5 minutes, and that was one of our biggest downfalls, is we were giving them a list of things we wanted them to talk about, and it was taking them way more than 5 minutes and hindering them from getting their day started. I didn't mention this a while ago, but you know, in my hospital at Helen, Keller, when things got so bad with COVID and everybody was so gloomy, and we ran a census of about 60 COVID patients, and we had them dying left and right, and it was the grief and the sadness in the organization was palpable when you walked up onto our big floors. And then if you went into our infectious disease unit, where that was our most sick, our sickest COVID patients, all of them were vented, they were proning them, they were dying. And I thought, what can we do that's really easy to improve the morale in the hospital, because it just got really tough for all of the people across the hospital. And in Pulaski, we had started 3 Good Things. And that was something that we learned as part of our resiliency training. So we rolled out 3 Good Things, and it was just at the beginning of the shift, we talk about 3 good things. And it doesn't have to be work related. It can be that I actually fed my kid a real meal last night, or I got them to school on time, or whatever it might be. And it could be so simple, but it needed to be something positive. So we rolled that out, and a lot of people are doing that in their briefs in the mornings, and that is a really good resiliency builder for your staff. It helps them to realize that the world's not falling apart all the time, and even though we're really short-staffed, things are okay in our lives, and it'll be all right. It's so simple. The things that give us the least amount or the most happiness in our lives are not things we talk about at work all the time, but it's really important that we bring those kind of happy moments into our environment that is not so happy all of the time. So 3 Good Things is a really good thing. And what I had in my hospital, because our walls are packed with all kinds of stuff, we didn't really have space to put another board up. We started using the clear glass in the break rooms that are on the doors, the windows that you can see through, and I would walk through and they'd have their 3 good things written up for the shift. In Pulaski, our EVS folks were some of the best to do 3 good things when we do our patient safety rounds. And they loved it. And your staff will love it too. And it seems so simple sometimes, and it might seem a little cheesy, but people really need to remember what their real purpose is and what does make them happy in their lives, especially right now with things being as rough as it has been.
The brief is not part of the report.
That's right. Brief is not part of the report, because we could get into bedside shift report and all, but your bedside shift report, if you're doing that, should be where the exchange of shift-to-shift information should occur. But the brief is establishing your team for the day, is what you're really trying to do. I didn't put this in the slides, but are y'all having morning briefs as an organization, like safety briefs in the morning? No.
Starts Monday.
All right, so your brief on your unit should help drive what you report in your hospital brief. So our unit leaders help facilitate the brief, and we really push that at first because we want to make sure that they're using the briefs like they should. But as your organization matures in doing these, you shouldn't have to be there to lead the brief. Your staff should be able to do that independently, and they should do it as part of their regular routine. You shouldn't have to be there saying, hey, let's do a brief. It should just become part of what they do every day. And if your hospital's like every other hospital, you don't have that much as far as resources at night. So it's even more important that they know what's going on the night shift than really on the day shift, to me. Anything else about briefs? And the morning brief, again, even as a whole hospital bringing everybody together, your morning briefs should be really quick. In our organization, at Keller, we do it a little bit different than what I learned at LifePoint, because they're on a different high reliability journey with a different company, so they even use different verbiage, and I'm really struggling with that a little bit. But they do a backwards-forwards look when they report in their brief in the mornings, or we do, I should say. So they'll say, looking back, we had 2 falls last night, none of them were with injury. Looking forward, we are going to have 5 new post-op patients on the floor today, or looking forward, we're short-staffed, or looking forward, we are holding 6 ER patients for admission. So they do a backwards-forward looks, like this is what happened in the last 24 hours, and this is what we're anticipating to happen in the next 24 hours. And then we'll ask about start the clock issues. Are there things that we need to follow up on tomorrow that we need to start the clock on? Sterilizer is down in the OR. We're going to start the clock on that and make sure that we follow up daily to make sure that's back up and running. So there's a lot of different ways you can do briefs as an organization, but they still should be really, really short. We have about 35 managers, and ours lasts about 10 minutes in the mornings, given that much information. So they should be short. Debriefs. I already talked a little bit about debriefs. This is one of the easiest things for our folks to do, especially around emergency events, codes, stat C sections, things out of the ordinary that happen that you want to talk about after it happens. They should be short and very specific to whatever's going on. And y'all, I'm giving this PowerPoint to Jim also, so you don't have to try to write everything down. The debriefs serve as a way to assess how the team feels about something that's happened, either at the end of their shift, which is really, really hard to get them to do, or after some sort of critical event. A debrief should be positive. It should be focused on learning. It should not be well, you did that again, and you shouldn't have done it. It shouldn't be negative. It should be everybody bringing their collective knowledge together and talking about an event. At one of the hospitals that I went to as interim, we started debriefing codes because they were not debriefing the codes, and they were like, we will never get everybody to stay from a code, because you really need the people involved in the event to do the debrief. It is useless for me to sit around a table and debrief a code that happened on one of my floors and not have any of the people that were at the code involved. It's kind of pointless to do that. So we started debriefing codes, and we learned a lot about our code process and what the staff had available to them in the crash carts. And they were just like, I can't believe we haven't been doing this all along. And even the physicians were so engaged and gave us feedback on things they'd like to see happen during a code. So if you start with anything with debriefs, make it around your codes in the hospital. And then expand it to your stat C sections. And you may think you've done everything perfect, but I promise you, every single event you'll find something that you could do better. Doesn't mean you did things wrong. It just means there's always something you can improve on. You'll find out a lot about your crash carts if you start debriefing after codes. And I don't know if y'all have gone to a standardized crash cart setup or not, but you find out really quickly what your crash carts look like when you start debriefing after a code. And you will find all kinds of stuff stashed in your crash carts that will never be used in a code. So get those things out and dust them off and standardize your crash carts before your next code, because that's going to come up. In Pulaski, we didn't do a whole lot of deliveries, so we had to debrief every single event that we had so that we made sure we learned from everything. Because, for one thing, we needed everybody to learn from what we were doing, because they may not see this again for 6 months or a year or ever if they were on the night shift. But we got our physician, Dr. Kara Riley, engaged in doing debriefs after stat sections, and she about drove us nuts because we got to debrief. We go, well, I don't have time right now, we'll do it later. No, we got to debrief. So she kind of became our champion for debriefing stat sections, but your physicians love this. It gives them a voice too, because a lot of times they don't want to tell you what they feel like is wrong or what we could do better, because they don't want to offend anybody, believe it or not. By getting your physicians engaged, you'll learn a lot about your opportunities to do better for your patients. And really, it is all about doing better for the patients. It's not about hurting anybody's feelings or telling anybody they're doing stuff wrong. It's about doing better for our patients, and that's what we got to keep in mind all the time. So benefits of debrief, you probably already know this. It positively engages the team, promotes problem solving, encourages the team to come up with solutions. And the more the staff come up with their solutions, the more engaged they are and the more they own what you're doing. Key concepts. A debrief should occur at the end of an event or a shift. You use 3 standard questions. What went well? What could we do differently? What did we learn? And then you identify problems, and we'll talk about learning boards in a little bit, but ideally, whatever you've learned in your debrief should go on your learning board as something you can follow up on and correct as you're going forward. Unit debriefs. Like I said, one of the hardest things to get going because everybody's ready to go. So we were most effective doing unit debriefs if they would do them about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, or towards the end of their shift, but not exactly the end of their shift, because once they got to that shift change time, they were just checked out and ready to go. Nobody wants to debrief when they're ready to go home. So we encouraged our charge nurses to start doing that about 5 or 6 o'clock. We had 12-hour shifts, 7 to 7, and talk about how the day went. I'm not sure that we ever got that done as effectively as it is intended to be done at the end of a shift. I'll just be very honest. But definitely doing them after your codes and things is a really big deal. Huddles. The next thing is huddles. It's really easy to get briefs and huddles mixed up, and the verbiage and terminology is used interchangeably sometimes. But really your huddle is an unplanned event where your brief is very planned and very scripted, and you're covering certain information in your brief. Your huddle will be more of an unplanned event where you're just trying to fight whatever issue has come up. Say you had someone that had to leave suddenly because they have a sick family member, and you've got to reassign that person's patients to the rest of the crew. So you may pull everybody together and say, hey, we got to huddle real quick. Somebody's had to go home. I'm going to give you 2 patients, you 2 patients, and you 2 patients, or whatever it might be. And like I said, it shouldn't be confused with briefs because these are unplanned. We huddled a lot about staffing. I don't know about y'all, but staffing could change on a whim. So a lot of times we're like, we're going to huddle about staffing. But you can huddle about most anything. You want to make sure that you're re-engaging the group. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to regroup, re-engage them. It could be that you've had 12 admissions all of a sudden, or your ER is covered up with patients and you're huddling up and trying to figure out how we're going to deal with all those patients. You can reinforce existing plans because things have changed unexpectedly. And sometimes people just get lost in the weeds, and you just need to pull them back together and say, okay, yes, this is going on, but we're going to still march forward, and this is what we're going to do. You're going to still take care of these patients. He keeps interrupting me. You see who's got his hand up all the time.
Point of clarification, ER in Pulaski is a 7-bed ER. So 12 ER patients
is a big deal.
Is a big deal.
But I'll tell you, in our ER, we have a 22-bed ER, and there was a time we were holding 8 ICU patients in our ER, and we were huddling up pretty regularly because our ER nurses were having come-aparts with vented patients staying a long time. And I'm talking 2 and 3 days in the ER, so we were constantly having huddles, for, if nothing else, just to pull them together and say, guys, y'all are doing a great job. What can we do for you? What do you need from us? So there's all kinds of challenges out there and reasons that you would huddle up. Key concepts, huddles. Called with one or more individuals. You might just huddle with one person. It might just be me going to the OB director and saying, you've got 4 people in labor and you only got 2 nurses. What are we going to do about that? It might be around changes in the plan of care, around staffing needs, things like that. But it should be unplanned. It shouldn't be a planned event every day. Any questions about huddles? Do you see yourselves doing huddles already, probably? I'm sure you do. You just may not call them that. All right. Learning boards. So a learning board is a unit level board that's displayed. It has 3 very distinct zones. Did you bring the learning board?
I did not.
Oh, gosh.
They've seen it.
Okay. I give him a really hard time, y'all. I don't know how he didn't fire me all these years. But 3 distinct zones, red, yellow, green. The red is for your problem, opportunity, whatever you want to call it. That's where they're posted. The yellow is where you move that problem or concern or whatever it might be. Defect is what they call them in LifePoint when you're working on it. So when it's in yellow, it's not resolved yet, but someone is working on it. It moves to the green zone when it's been resolved. And like I said a while ago, learning boards were a challenge at the beginning because it became an I need board. We need a new CT. We need 12 new IV pumps. We need a new bariatric bed. All of those things that are capital budget items, and it's like, okay, how do we need this? Do we need it immediately? Are we impacting patient care? Because there were times that we did have to buy stuff, don't get me wrong, because when you go out to your floor and you find out they only have 1 thermometer working, it's probably time to buy some more thermometers. So some of the things were legitimate, but some of it was a lot of a wish list things. And so on our board, we have a parking lot. We would move things to the parking lot, which meant...
I like that.
Oh, the parking lot. it meant it's still on our radar, and it doesn't mean we're not going to do it, but we really can't do it right now because, you know, a new CT is just not going to happen right now. That's something that's planned. But we did honestly have some things we needed to purchase. I think bedside commodes was one thing. They're like, we don't have any bariatric bedside commodes, and that's a patient safety issue. So we bought some. Let's see, I did it's on the next slide, I think. So learning boards help measure staff awareness of items. Learning boards ideally go hand in hand with executive patient safety rounds. So when your senior leaders make rounds across the hospital, they should be doing that in front of the boards and helping facilitate movement of items that maybe the manager is struggling with, like those capital purchase items, or it might be a hospital policy that the unit level manager can't change on their own, but a senior leader could make that change. So those go hand in hand. It makes things visible to your staff. It lets them know, here is what we found, and here's where we are with resolving it, and here's what we've done. So, you know, as a manager, you do a lot of stuff that your staff don't realize that you do. This tells the story of what you're doing in relation to patient safety and how you're helping them improve care on their unit. This is a really small picture. I know you can't see it, but 3 distinct zones, red, yellow, and green. This is I should have made a bigger picture, but someone was supposed to bring one to show y'all. Just saying. Let me see if there's anything on there I haven't covered. Another thing, your briefs in the mornings and your debriefs, those things identified in those should go on your learning boards. Your learning board becomes your unit communication board. And it's really hard to get them in the habit of that, but we got to where anything they brought to us, we said, put on the board. Even the littlest thing. We need a new syringe pump, put it on the board. So we were telling them to put stuff that they needed on the board too, but we just wanted to get them used to going to that board and putting things on it. Managers are really quick to fix things immediately. And then you get to their board, and it looks like they haven't done anything because there's nothing posted. Are they even using the board? And the manager will say, well, I fix it as soon as they tell me about it. Still put it on the board. That way your staff know that it's been fixed, that you're doing something with your time, because you know they think managers don't do anything with their time, but you're working all the time. Put all that stuff on the board that you're doing, especially when you resolve things.
Sherry,
Mm-hmm.
A good example of that is, you know, Constance may bring something to Suzanne, and Suzanne jumps right on it and fixes it. So that's great for Constance, but it's more beneficial as well to the night shift and the weekend shift and so on and so forth, that Constance brought an issue up and Suzanne's already resolved it. And you can see that, you know, that there are problems that are being resolved. I mean, so we take for granted sometimes that the things that we do get communicated to everyone else across the shift. If Constance has a problem and she solves it 24 hours later, I mean, you're probably not going to be walking around saying, Suzanne, she's so great, she just solves my problems within 24 hours. I mean, you're probably not saying that, you know, you're really thinking that, you know. And the other thing is the learning boards also became, I don't think they started out this way, you have to tell me, but where people in other departments started putting things on, like dietary would put things on the medical surgical learning board, because frequently they delivered the meals there, and so they would go in and the patient had already gone home, and so they had a meal fixed and there was not a patient in the room, and so they would just reminder, please let us know when patients are being discharged so we don't waste a meal. And so that's an example of somebody from another department putting something on the learning board.
Exactly. And a lot of times we would put them on both boards, wherever it was happening, and then that way both units were following what the issue might be. There was a lot of interaction between dietary and nursing staff, a lot of things that went on, and it really helped kind of build those teams too, because there was a lot of animosity, things you didn't know were going on and had become a real frustration for people. I mean, you would wonder, why does dietary hate med-surg so much? You know, they're all such nice people. Why do they hate them? Well, when you would find out all the challenges they were having, getting meals passed, getting trays picked back up, going into isolation rooms that weren't labeled as isolation rooms, so we were putting the food nutrition folks at risk. There were just a lot of things that kind of let us understand why they didn't like med-surg so much. You're not going to be able to fix 100% of the things that are put on the board. But what you need to do is communicate to the staff why you can't fix it. This is a capital purchase item. It will not go to budget. It will not be even presented till next year. Move it over. Or there just may be things that you're not going to be able to fix. We cannot renovate med-surg. Sorry, we're not going to do it. You put your comment on there and you move on. There are going to be things you can't fix. If it's something I think we can do, I'd put it in the parking lot. And our boards, the ones I have now are a little bit different. We have red, yellow, green, and then there's a blue zone that says last 30 days. So that everything that's been done in the last 30 days is moved to that blue zone. It's completed, it's resolved, it was in the last 30 days. And it may be that there was not a resolution for it, but you need to put on that. We just use simple Post-it notes, and we bought some really fancy things too. I mean, you can have printed Post-it notes specific to it, but you just need to communicate to the staff why you can't make that happen. That's what's most important to them. Most of the times they understand. They just want to know that somebody's heard them, and they want you to tell them why. You know, it's no secret usually why we can't do something. If it's about money, it's about money. If it's not realistic, it's not realistic, but you need to tell them why it's not realistic. They don't understand that. They don't understand hospital operations. They don't understand what the processes are for some of these things. It's your job to help educate them. And a big part of being highly reliable is the transparency that you have with your staff. They just want to know. Jim used to share financials with our frontline staff about the hospital. That was one of the first places that I've ever been in where we will get up in front of our staff and say, guys, we lost this much money, or we made this much money this month, or whatever it might be. But your frontline folks don't understand that, so they just want to know. They want you to be open and honest with them, and if we can't do whatever they want you to do, tell them why. That's the biggest thing. And one thing I do encourage you to do is when you pull things off of the board, it needs to go to a notebook so that you have a record of it. And when your staff come to you and say, you haven't done nothing all year long, I don't know what you've been doing, but I haven't seen anything, you can pull out that notebook and say, that's not true. Now, I've taken care of 500 issues this year. But keep that as a record so that you just have it as a reference point. And that's what's best practice for safety boards, for learning boards, too. You will find out all kinds of things about your organization on these boards. And one of the things that made us feel the dumbest, probably, as senior leaders, was the cafeteria door issue. For years, our cafeteria door was a solid door. And it was the in and out point for the cafeteria. And you were always hoping nobody was coming through the other side because you were going to spill your lunch or whatever. Well, Tristan. She said, why don't we put a glass window in that door so people don't get hit? The hospital had been like that for years. And it's like, oh, well, why haven't we put a glass window in that door? That's so smart. Well, we put a glass window in the door and people quit spilling their lunches and get hit with the door. So there's things that when you're in a hospital for so long especially, it becomes blind. You become blind to it. And fresh ideas from newer people, it really helps move your organization forward. They start taking care of each other too. One of the things I remember the most was when we had our detox unit, and every night one of our nurses would escort our detox patients out to what was affectionately known as the butt hut to smoke. A med-surg nurse put something on the board about being concerned about that nurse's safety, because here she was going outside in the dark with these patients that sometimes were not really nice, and they were worried about her safety because nobody would be able to hear her if she, and it was almost always a female with mostly men. They were just really worried about her safety, so they put that on the safety board. And I thought, we've really got some mature boards now when they're starting to take care of each other. So you'll go through a point where you think, what good is this board? It's just a wish list, and I can't do anything with these wish items. But then as you keep pounding through it and you keep making them put stuff on there, even though you've already fixed it, put it on the board, it'll become more mature and they'll use it like you want them to use it. All right, patient safety rounds, executive patient safety rounds. Like I said, this was probably the toughest thing for me as the CNO to get hardwired in our organization because we just did not, I just didn't feel like we had the buy-in that we needed before Jim got there. But when he saw that CEO get chewed out over executive patient safety rounds, he was not going to be a part of that. Patient safety rounds gives the senior leaders time to go out, visit with the staff. We wore, and I got a little picture of our emblem, we wore gray jackets that said Southern Tennessee Patient Safety Team, so that when we were out there with those jackets on, they knew exactly what we were doing, because we were out in the hospital all the time, and we didn't want them to mistake it for just any other time. We wanted them to know that when we came in with these gray jackets on, pushing the candy cart, we had a candy cart. He will do a candy cart. Who's sweet talking? Do a candy cart, take it around. Okay, good. They knew that we were there to talk about the patient safety boards, the learning boards. So we would gather in front of those boards and we'd start looking through everything that was posted. You really need somebody, staff there with you to interpret some of the stuff that's on the board. And it's not that you're questioning things being up there or anything like that, but you sometimes don't understand exactly what they need by the little bit of description that they put on the board. We had a hard time getting people to want to sign what they put on the boards. And it wasn't to get anybody in trouble. It was so that we knew who to go to if we had questions about what they wanted, because they knew what they wanted, but sometimes what they put on their slip, it was hard for us to understand. So I think that got better through the years.
You know, and I might write on there, if we couldn't figure it out, and like the med-surg nurses that's there didn't know what I was talking about, I might write on there, I'd love to help you, but I don't know what you're talking about. You know, or I might say, go ahead and get this, and in the future, please sign your name, okay, so you can get credit for this. Mm-hmm. And and so by writing that stuff during an executive patient safety rounds, again, I might only conduct this with, Tracy or somebody, but at least somebody else, the rest of the shifts through the rest of the month, weekends and nights or whatever, come up and say, they really do round on this. They really do come by and look at this every month.
One thing to make sure you do too, and we're really good at this sometimes, but sometimes not really good at it, is making sure you're rounding on night shift, weekends. We tried to set up a schedule of doing it like once a quarter on nights or something like that, but that's real important. Work with Jim on what time works best. We learned real quick that going into the ER at 8 o'clock at night is not the best time to do patient safety rounds. So you have to work with him on what's the best time to visit your department on night shift. But doing it on night shift, and especially if you have dedicated weekend people, we have Baylor program, and so we have people that are never there through the week. You need to see those people on weekends. It's real important to them too. Let's see, I think I covered all of this stuff here. This is, I know you can't see that, but that was our little monogrammed scrub jackets that we wore. For us, it was the CEO, CNO, CFO, and our patient safety lead. Every LifePoint hospital had a dedicated patient safety lead, so it was the four of us typically rounding. And we would divide up in groups. So it would be clinical person with a non-clinical person, because sometimes our CFO had this paranoia of being asked a medical question, so we always made sure we had someone that was clinical go with him, especially if we were taking him back to the Jerry Psych unit, because he had this fear of being back in Jerry Psych. But we would divide it up. We divided up the number of departments we were going on, because it could take you 2 hours to do just half of the units, and especially if you have on-campus buildings that are outside of the hospital. I don't know what y'all's campus looks like, but we would round on our physician offices, and we had PT that was there, and HIM was off outside of the hospital. So when we would divide our departments up, it would take us a good 2 hours. So if you were doing it all as one group and visiting every unit, it would probably take you half of the day to do it if you did it right. And really engaged people, and because you don't want to go in there and act like you're in a rush and ready to get out. If you can get those folks to engage with you and talk to you, you want to spend time talking to them. You don't want to seem as a leader like you're in a rush and ready to get away from them. It's really important. As managers, though, with those learning boards, it is real important that you move stuff across the board, too. Don't wait till your senior leaders come to start moving things. It sends a really good message to your staff when you're trying to address those things, too. And really, it's about connecting with them and helping them see that you're engaged, too, and that you're looking at the problems that they have and you're willing to work on them. And then if it can't happen at your level, then the senior leaders are going to come around and they're going to work on fixing their thing. It's all about tying the team together and keeping everybody engaged and focused on patient safety. That's the biggest thing.
One of the things that we also started doing is you inevitably had some departments that never had anything on patient safety.
Yes.
Nothing. There was no issues on this department. And you'd have an area like pharmacy that had billions of things on it. And so what we started doing was we would take the person that had nothing on their board, and they would go on an executive patient safety round so they could see all the other boards and what it looked like to have a robust patient safety board. And we'd take that high performer as well and take us with them. And so it also, the executive patient safety round became a vehicle also for managers as well to go around and look at other best practices. I mean, you want to take somebody to a really good executive patient, or to a good patient safety board, go to pharmacy.
Yeah, our pharmacy board was probably one of the best in all of LifePoint, honestly. They used every single thing that came up, because pharmacy deals with a lot of patient safety issues, and it's a lot of collaboration between nursing and pharmacy, so there were a lot of issues around barcode scanning and insulin, and I mean, just anything that came up at the patient level, no matter who it involved, it went on their board. And they worked that board all the time. It was by far the most robust board I've probably seen in all of the hospitals I've been in. Well, and the techs owned it more than anybody. The techs loved having this communication tool because you have so many techs and so many pharmacists that they didn't know what each other had done. And so they used it as much as a communication board internally as they did to surface problems and defects. So. All right, Jen, that's all I have. Does anybody have questions for me?